Hi, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we'll be featuring the audio from a Future Leaders Series meeting that we had here at our company, Peterman Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, where we talk in depth about the book Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink. In this part 3 of this 3-part series, we're going to talk about the concept that Jocko highlights in chapter 3 of his book, Resolute but Not Overbearing. Jocko references a subject matter called leadership capital. And so I talk a little bit about how to deploy your leadership capital, where you want to deploy it, when you want to deploy it, and how we can avoid over deploying it to where we essentially overmanage, micromanage, if you will, our people and don't get the buy-in that we're looking for. So without any further ado, check out the audio. Hope you enjoy it and can learn something from it as well. The third chapter in this book, this was one that I kind of read over and I was like, man, I'm trying to spin this and teach out of this chapter, which was difficult. I was rereading the chapter this morning and figuring okay, I've got some notes here. How do I really, how do I fit this in there? And really, it has about the same vein of thinking as the kind of first two chapters, first two subjects. And it really gets into how to avoid the micromanagement, how to deploy what he calls it as leadership capital. So I thought this was an interesting concept. So essentially, think about it as you've only got so much leadership that you can put on your people. The objective is, where are you going to deploy that? Are you going to try to manage every little thing you can, thinking that that's leadership? Or are you going to pick and choose where you lead? Pick and choose where we put in process. The title of the chapter is Resolute but Not Overbearing. So he opens with a story, and if you get a chance to read this book, really amazing. But he starts out with a story about the radios. And so when they were over in Iraq, it's actually, he writes it with one of his commanders that was just underneath him, and I don't know the exact kind of title for that, but he was right underneath him. And so he's writing this chapter, and he talks about taking friendly fire from a tank. He talks about, they took friendly fire, and the SEALs do not use the same radio frequency type thing that another branch of the military uses, and so they got to switch the radio, contact the guy in the tank, and tell him to stop shooting at us. And so he talks about that, and then he kind of reflects back on an instance where Jocko was in a meeting and asked the guys, do you know how to program your radio? And, you probably can guess what kind of look fell over the group of guys, as you've probably seen in a meeting of your own, where you ask them a question and the answer is probably, they probably don't know how to do this. And so it talks about how he took a guy's radio, and I guess you can scramble the radio where it basically resets itself, and then you got to program it. And he said, tossed it to a guy and said, hey, program your radio. Well, obviously he did not know how to do that, along with most of the other guys. And the commander that's writing this chapter kind of reflects on that story, saying that he didn't start screaming and yelling and berating these guys, and you idiots, I don't understand how you can't do this. And he just simply said, guys, we need to figure this out. And he knew that they needed to figure this out, and that they needed to know how to reprogram the radios, which ultimately led to them saving their lives in the opening story, because he was able to reprogram his radio and talk to the other branch that was shooting at them. Obviously not intentionally, but just didn't know that they were there in that particular building. And so he deployed his leadership capital on something that was extremely important and something that they needed to know. But it wasn't in a degrading manner. It was in a, guys, let's get this done. And so to me, this chapter is all about finding where we need to deploy our leadership capital. What are those what are those principles, what are those processes that we need to follow, but then also at the same time allowing our people to be creative. And so to me, creativity can sometimes be, can we draw a picture? Can we think up a crazy idea or a game or something like that? But in this instance, to me, creativity is more so figuring out by yourself. When I think about this chapter, I think a lot about our Next Star process that we run with our service technicians. There's 6 steps to the process. We need to hit all 6 steps. But at the end of the day, we also need them to be creative, because creativity in that instance is personality. How do you put the personality in that process? If you just send a robot in there to run that process, you're not going to be very successful. The secret sauce to that process is your personality. How do you connect with the customer? How do you develop that relationship? The same thing goes with anything in business. Is we need our people to be creative. They're on the front lines. They're seeing it. It's very, very easy to drum up another process. But at the end of the day, as leaders, we have to be flexible enough to understand that that process may not work like exactly how we planned it. Like there's things that come into play. There's things that people are seeing out there. And so the key in this is when we do have to make a stance and say, hey, this needs to be done, the key is, as you guys would probably all agree, we got to tell them why. Why is it important? Not do this because I said so. Why in the hell is that important? Why do we need to do something different today than we did yesterday? Why? The crazy thing is, and you've probably seen this if you've, really dug into, I probably need to explain why we're doing this, is when you start to connect the dots for the people that you're leading, when you start to tell them why things are changing, why things are a little bit different today, they start to develop a better process. Oh, okay. So this affects this person, this person, this person, this person. Why don't I just do it like this? It's a lot easier, and I think that would go easier for them. Great idea. When you understand why we're doing something, you begin to take ownership of that. Oh, okay. You begin to follow that leader, because the leader isn't telling you to do something. They've figured out something that benefits the whole. Everybody wants to benefit the whole. There's not people out there, at least in our organization, that want to I'd really like to do well, but I'd really like to see this company hit the bottom. That'd be great. Well, that ain't gonna work. No one's saying that. Come on. Everybody wants to see the group do well, and you want to see yourself do well. Well, okay. How does this process benefit both? That's what we're trying to get at. And as leaders, oftentimes our intentions are good. We just have to explain those intentions to our people. Why are we doing that? It's not difficult. We just have to make sure that we do it. Because there is a why. It's not like we have to drum this up. There's a why we changed it. There's a why we're doing this, not that. We just have to explain it. And then the other piece of that in leadership is, why do we make it so hard? Well, we got to think up a process for this. Why not flip it around and give them the problem? Why not ask them for their input? We talk about empowering people. Here's the problem. This doesn't work. This person can't get this information, and then they can't do their job. How can we fix that? Ultimate buy-in comes from when people are able to make decisions, people are able to be creative. So how do we allow them to help build the process? Coming down with new decrees, if you will, is not always the best instance. You look back in history, anybody that came down with a decree, things usually didn't end up well. So don't follow that example. Follow the path that allows your team to create, allows them to come up with the solution to the problem. Why use your leadership capital if you don't have to? If you don't have to use your leadership capital in creating a process and stuff like that, and your people can create it for you, let them do it. Those are chips you can take off the table and probably deploy in other useful areas. Don't use them if you don't have to. And it'll actually work out better. Thinking about our leadership capital, thinking about some of the stuff that we've talked about, the biggest thing that I take away from this is we always have the opportunity to be improving. Whether that is leadership of ourselves, leadership of others, leadership of a bunch of others. We're always getting better. What this does is gives us a roadmap for how we can get there most effectively. And I got news for you. You will fall off that road. It's very easy. If I were to really take inventory, I'd probably do every single day. Because not being a leader is far easier than being one. Think about it. Being a leader of your own actions is difficult. Anybody tried a new diet, workout program? Doing something different? It's hard. It's easier to not be that leader. But we all have the choice. We all have the ability. We just have to be willing to step in that direction. What we've talked about today is a way to step in the right direction when it comes to getting the most out of your people, empowering them to grow, and thus taking the management of mistakes, and failure, and processes not followed, starts to erase that when you start to lead people instead of managing them. Management of people can be extremely frustrating, both to you as the manager and also to your people. But when you start leading your people, you start allowing them to grow. All of those little management things that you've got to do, all those little processes you got to put in place, you think, they start to go away because your people start to lead themselves. They start to want to get better. Well, yeah, crap, I ought to probably not do that. They've told me that. I want to get better. I can't keep doing that. That seems silly. But we have to lead that charge. We've got to shine that light on what they could be, on what is possible. So as you go out today, think about these things. Think about asking those questions. Think about being patient. Understand that it is a long game. It takes a while to grow people. Think about your own journey. How long has it taken you to continue to get better and we're still not there? Leadership is an infinite game. You're always growing. You're always getting better. You're always pushing to learn a little bit more, to impact someone a little bit more.